In 2021, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to two remarkable journalists, Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, with a citation for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace, and for their commitment to communicating the facts. The award came as a tremendous fillip for many in the profession who saw it as a much needed public recognition of the value that objective journalists play in society in terms of fact finding and communicating the truth in the face of the web of confusion of the digital era and the insidious prevalence of fake news. The overarching principle behind the Nobel Committee's decision was the importance of being able to have access to all the facts in order for people to make their own informed judgments, having the opportunity to evaluate all the information available. Their recognition came before, of course, the terrifying atrocities that shocked the world unleashed on October the 7th. Inconsolable grief, rage, hatred, prejudice, racism have manifested like magma from the depths of the Earth's core. And whilst there may be a moral component to the requirement to keep the world informed, the challenges of reporting in a volatile and unpredictable world where anguish, suffering, shattered lives increasingly form the heart of news reports makes this an unappealing business. But for those committed to revealing the facts, the clear requirement for dispassion and unbiased presentation is a belief worth cherishing, even if at times the very act of being dispassionate brings journalists under attack. Over many years, I've spoken to Israeli and Arab journalists, regional and international leaders about the situation in the Middle East. And interestingly, all, and particularly the leaders, including many of those involved in ongoing discussions today, have expressed the importance of understanding the full picture and the value, that all-important value of journalists depicting perceptions and opinions on the other side, which otherwise these leaders would simply not have access to. Proof may lie in the fact that despite global news organizations coming under attack for being biased, or indeed even not showing bias, world leaders still find it very important to keep channels open for the reputable media to have access to views on all sides and to keep talking to them. The BBC broadcasting editorial principles that have informed my approach to international affairs is premised on the idea of impartial information conveyed in an objective manner, without bias and without prejudice, reporting as full a picture as possible and leaving it up to the audience to make their own assessments. We live in a world where opinion and fake news absolutely abounds. I believe that access to facts provides an important service to society. It's absolutely essential if we're going to continue to exist in the world in a tolerable way. We need to have facts to engage authoritatively in discussion. Polarization, polemical opinion is an eternal and inescapable feature of human society. But the facts are, and of course they always should be, invariable and conveyed in a dispassionate manner by responsible professionals who often hold the desire to further the path to find a resolution whenever the time is right. Many of my friends have immersed themselves in international news journalism, but they've become disheartened and they've often become disillusioned that the facts are not considered essential. even though reporting from the ground is becoming increasingly dangerous. To navigate a world where language has assumed an importance never seen before in the modern era is becoming so challenging that it soon may become impossible to cut through, facing as we do a situation where previously routine and even neutral words are regarded as loaded. Vocabulary such as halt, pause, stop, those words have become highly nuanced international terms. And for individuals trying to straddle both sides of a political divide and to communicate to various audiences, it's like walking a tightrope high above an abyss. This makes the task of reporting things as they are a really precarious activity, where there's a risk that perception permanently replaces reality, and where the absence of facts generates hostility and mistrust. And this undoubtedly undermines efforts to find resolution in the long term. Injudicious use of language closes avenues abruptly. Eyes become blinkered, ears are closed. Yet the prospect of the descent of an entire region into bloody conflict is such a terrifying spectre, but that spectre stalks the lands. To avert this is a battle worth fighting, and I'm sure many of my colleagues are completely committed to doing that. But all the while, there is the knowledge that it's far easier to talk to one audience with a position in their camp than to maintain objectivity and impartiality and come under attack. Those familiar with the protracted discussions that have led undoubtedly to numerous Middle East accords and treaties will comprehend the complexity of the situation on the ground. That borders are subject to controls from both sides. The reality is not always what is depicted by the picture on first viewing. Neighbouring countries, understandably, see an influx of refugees as a threat to their own stability and to their prosperity. And the dynamics of relationships within and outside the region are fundamentally affected. There are compelling reasons why there are ongoing discussions in various countries and why efforts have been redoubled by some nations to broker immediate talks. Of course, you hear this a lot. It's not my story. It's far away. It won't affect me. But the agony in the Middle East is an agony that's going to be experienced by the whole world, with no corner immune to the impact and no community untouched. However, this current situation is on our doorstep, but we can influence the future. The crucible bubbling over has unleashed forces that are uncontrollable. What we're hearing and seeing is torment, catastrophic pain and fear linked to wide instability, helplessness and hopelessness, with a precarious future ahead. Disturbingly violent events and protests in faraway parts of the world like Bangladesh, Dagestan, and the US have been sparked by current events in the Middle East. What I and my colleagues are hearing from governments around the world is that the will of the people and the mood on the streets is something that political leaders can ignore at their peril. The memories of the Arab Spring fresh in their minds and real concerns about the escalation into an infernal regional conflict shaped the thinking of leaders of Jordan and Egypt and the other countries in the region. King Abdullah and President el-Sisi took the very public step of cancelling their meeting with President Biden. That caught the Western world completely off guard. Qatar, meanwhile, is engaged very actively in talks to shape an outcome that opens the door rather than pulling up the drawbridge. Oman, for example, its diplomacy is a very useful asset in the region, having successfully brokered secret groundbreaking talks between Iran and the US in the recent past. There is a great deal of international concern to find a path forward, and neighbouring countries are playing their part. That offers hope, driven perhaps by pragmatism, to avoid the region being engulfed by conflagration. In London, we've seen protests and demonstrations by people distraught by what has happened in recent weeks. In many ways, there seem to be no answers, but there may be glimmers of hope that we can garner. And one example of this is a cross-community meeting held in Westminster Abbey between Jewish and Muslim women. They were united in an agreement that both religious communities must fight for safety and empathy. One of the conclusions of that meeting was that the paucity of women involved in high leadership and discussions was believed to be a possible reason for the divide across their communities being so profound. Many of those women understood that in today's fast-moving and insatiable 24-hour digital environment, the pressures to express an opinion have been overwhelming, but the flood of views have also opened the doors for hatred and prejudice. Further, I would add that it is immeasurably complicating the ability for those engaged in meaningful discussions and trying to preserve life to make the breakthroughs that are so needed. The plethora of views, not always informed by fact, creates an inundation of words that can also serve to throw the whole picture out of focus. The importance of keeping hope alive in the most desperate of situations brought back to me memories of interviews and conversations I conducted with two visionary individuals from the Israeli and Palestinian communities who enjoyed great friendship and discussed many ideas on music, culture, and humanity. And in their inspirational exchange of ideas, Daniel Barenboim and Edward Said identified an urgent need to find an alternative way to address the divide. That led to the birth of a fascinating phenomenon known as the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. It was named, of course, after the great German philosopher and writer Goethe, and his collection of poems, West Eastern Divan, was considered central for the concept of an interlinked world culture. And Daniel Barenboim and Edward Said found great inspiration in this concept. The orchestra forges links across ethnic groups, it forges links across communities, across religions, and it fosters understanding and collaboration. In today's context, founder Daniel Barenboim has said that the obligation to ensure that the message must be stronger than before to promote cultural dialogue, intercultural dialogue, is incredibly resonant. It's set to prove that time and time again, other avenues can break down barriers previously considered insurmountable. One thing Daniel Barenboim said, our project may not change the world, but it is a step forward. And those incremental steps together add up to something meaningful, inevitably. Both the founders were united in the idea that the orchestra could offer hope that bridges could be built. It's heartwarming that the task of the orchestra has been taken on by the families of the original founders. And this should offer us all inspiration and direction for a new generation where dialogue can dominate and common ground can be cultivated. Thank you.